When we look at the fall of Lucifer in the biblical account, or consider the celestial war in the heavens that took place at the end of the book of Revelation, we might often think in terms of winners and losers. The biblical God was indisputably the victor of the conflict, and the Archangel Michael, along with 2/3 of the angels who remain loyal to the cause, got to remain in heaven and maintain the celestial status quo. Meanwhile, Lucifer and the third of the angels who failed to defeat Michael and were subsequently cast out of heaven were relegated to the earth and treated thereafter as villainous and detestable. In Christian tradition, Lucifer becomes the wicked Satan, and his fellow angels become demons. The way the Bible presents the angels in heaven, we are indeed led to believe that all the angels picked a side and that none were left sitting on the fence. 1/3 of them were tempted and deceived by Lucifer into joining his rebellion, whilst the majority, the 2/3, remain loyal to God. Yet from the early Middle Ages onwards, various authors and poets have spoken about the possibility that not all angels were accounted for, and that there was a small minority who managed to slip through the cracks. These angels were said to be the ones who, though didn't support Lucifer's rebellion, didn't declare fealty to God either. These angels, according to the writers we'll speak about in a moment, were dubbed as Craven Angels, angels who were too faint-hearted to take up arms with Lucifer, but also too fearful or lethargic to actually defend the heavens and bolster God's ranks. As a result of their abstinence from the conflict, or pusillanimity, or apathy, they too were cast out of the heavens in the same fashion as Lucifer and his minions. But where Lucifer's role and the roles of his angels are more clearly defined in their corrupting of the souls of men, the fate of these craven angels remains open to interpretation. Indeed, God did not want these irresolute angels to remain in his kingdom, so there's a chance that Satan would have no want of them too, considering they hadn't supported his cause either. Therefore, what possible role would these homeless angels have played in this new world governed mostly by man? In an 8th century Latin text, known as the Voyage of St. Brendan the Abbot, the seaborne journey of an Irish priest named St. Brendan, sometimes noted as Brendan the Navigator, is detailed, where we learn St. Brendan and a party of monks set sail in search of the Garden of Eden. The voyage itself was believed to have been dated between 512 and 530 AD, but efforts to legitimize the expedition in history have proven to be somewhat fruitless. Instead, it's believed that Brendan's voyage belongs to what's called an Imram, a class of old Irish tales in the early Christian era that also fused elements of Irish mythology. We can see this in how Brendan encounters various creatures on the waters, and at one point even mistakenly lands on an island that turns out to be a giant sea monster. It is on such an adventure that St. Brendan and his monks come across a giant tree that is flocked with very white birds. So many birds, in fact, that one might have mistaken them for the very leaves of the branches. Brendan becomes so enamored by the sight of these birds, and so curious as to why they've assembled on this particular tree in such a number, that he sinks to his knees and begs God to explain it to him. After doing this, one of the birds takes flight, where its wings are described as sounding like bells, and then perches itself on the prow of Brendan's ship. Seeing this as a sign from God, Brendan approaches the bird and actually begins to speak to it, asking that if it is a messenger from God, he'd be grateful to have learned the truth behind this seemingly divine spectacle. The bird then turns to Brendan and begins to speak, telling him, "The great ruin of the ancient enemy brought us here, even though we did not participate in his conspiracy of sin. After our creation, Satan's fall with his minions resulted in our ruin as well." Now, you might be thinking that this doesn't seem like too bad of a punishment, and to be fair, there certainly are worse ones. The bird goes on to explain that after their inactivity during the war in heaven, God deemed them unworthy to remain there, seeing as they did not fight for it. But as they did no wrong either, they would instead be made to live on the earth. However, the bird does recognize that they are now separated from the angels who remain loyal. Indeed, they can still see the presence of God, but there is an implication of loss here. They are aware that they are no longer close to their Lord as they had previously been. Yet the bird expresses gratitude nonetheless that even though they technically aren't angels anymore, they do not suffer for their inaction. What's interesting is that the bird actually reveals to Brendan that this is not their true form. In fact, it would seem that they were able to retain their more angelic appearance, but were turned into these white birds on holy days and Sundays, where they gathered together in this very place to praise God and the mercy he had on them. By the early 13th century, the fate of the Craven Angels evolved into something a bit more dark, and perhaps emulated the more wrathful nature that the readers of the Old Testament would come to expect of God. According to German poet Wolfram von Eschenbach, in his chivalric romance poem on the Arthurian hero Percival, known more famously in the German Parsifal, a pagan seer named Phlegethonus comes into contact with the Craven Angels, though they are now a far cry from the leisurely, peaceful birds seen in St. Brendan's account. At first, Phlegethonus, who we learn is a man who studies the planets and constellations in order to discover the hidden secrets of the heavens and the earth, learns that the Holy Grail is a stone with wondrous powers, and that an angelic troop left it on the earth before returning to heaven. Here a Christian progeny of pure life was bred, in order to guard the stone and prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. Phlegethonus tells us though that before this was entrusted to this Christian progeny, this responsibility fell upon the shoulders of the Craven Angels, and this was effectively their punishment. He reveals to us, when Lucifer and the Trinity began to war with each other, those who did not take sides, worthy, noble angels, had to descend to earth to that stone, which is forever incorruptible. What's more, Phlegethonus continues in this section that he couldn't determine whether or not God forgave these angels, but that considering the stone was now believed to be guarded by a pure Christian, according to his readings of the constellations, then God must have relieved these angels of this burden and taken them back. However, by the end of this story, Phlegethonus is revealed to be incorrect, and it turns out God never did forgive these Craven Angels, nor did he receive them back into the heavens. He tells us, "He never ceases to war against those whom I name to you here as forgiven. Whoever desires to have reward from God must be enfued with those angels, for they are eternally damned and chose their perdition." As we're consulting ancient poetry, it would be remiss if we skipped over the work of Dante Alighieri, who in the Divine Comedy not only details many angels and demons, but speaks specifically on Craven Angels themselves. In his account, Dante describes a place that is filled with terrible sighs, groans, and plaintive wailing, which causes him to well up in tears. Here there are diverse tongues, horrible dialects, words of agony, accents of anger, and the voices of the high and the hoarse. As you can imagine, like most of the places found within this poem, it's not a nice place. When Dante asks his guide, the poet Virgil, to explain what all those dreadful sounds are, Virgil tells him, "This miserable condition afflicts the melancholy souls of those who lived without infamy or praise. They are commingled with that noisome choir of angels who were neither rebels nor faithful to God, but only for themselves." To me, the angels in St. Brendan's account sound lethargic. They were aware that they were being punished for doing nothing, whilst the angels in von Eschenbach's account sound apathetic. They were worthy and noble, and yet still remained passive. Yet Virgil makes the angels in the Divine Comedy sound as if they were conceited, and didn't get involved in the conflict because of the risk it might have had to their own well-being. They were only looking out for themselves. It is then almost fitting that in Dante's account, these Craven Angels receive the most scathing and humiliating punishment, where they are expelled from the heavens but also unwelcome in hell. To really illustrate their suffering, Virgil explains to Dante that these particular angels lament so loudly and make such desperate wails because there is truly no salvation for them. They have no hope of death, and this blind life of theirs is so debased that they envy every other fate. The world allows them to have no glory. Mercy and justice both despise them. Let us not speak of them, but look and then pass by. Whilst the original biblical account makes no reference to a third category of angels, these Craven Angels, and instead focuses more so on the clear dichotomy of righteous loyalty and wicked rebellion, they do add another layer of complexity and intrigue to the greater narrative. The nature of God's angels and Lucifer's angels can be pretty straightforward. One is good, one is bad. But with this third unsettling category, we are given something that's far more reflective of human morality, that which isn't always black and white. The reason why I like this idea of Craven Angels, even if it's not biblically canon, is that whilst many would say they'd obviously side with God, or maybe side with Satan, I think a lot of people would find themselves in this middle grey passage, unable or unwilling to really decide between the two options. The poets who ran with this notion have thus enabled us to consider the struggle between good and evil on another level, of those who are neither willing to bow before God or throw in with Satan. Of course, in the narratives we've discussed today, the lack of action is framed as a failure of character, whether born of fear, self-interest, or mere lassitude. Here in this context, one who sits on the fence is ultimately warned that not choosing a side at all is tantamount to choosing the wrong side anyway. Inaction and turning a blind eye is thus punishable with the utmost extremes, where offenders can expect to be despised and shunned by both sides, and left, in the case of the Craven Angels, both physically and spiritually homeless. As always guys, if you've enjoyed today's episode, then don't forget to leave this video a like and subscribe for more content just like this. Until next time.